what an astounding revolution Bitcoin is immune from attack.
And welcome to the Crypto Show's Digital Cash Evolution right here on the Bloomberg Network.
I'd like to thank the Masternode Network for partially funding this this venture. I always like to give a little bit of thanks to the Dash Masternode Network, and today we have two special guests. Sorry, my name is Chuck Williams. I'm here with host Danny Sessions, and we have with us today Ryan Taylor, Dash CEO, and Bob Carroll, Dash CTO, and about 20 or 30 people at the Dash inaugural meetup in Denver. And we're going to take, cheers from the crowd, just for a minute. Nice, I like that. So we'll take some questions from the audience. We'll get a little bit of interview going with the leadership of Dash Core Group, and we'll take it from there. Yeah.
Let's start with Ryan.
So, yeah, Ryan, for the audience here, I want you to tell a little bit about yourself, for the audience, for the people, a little bit about Dash, where you're coming from.
Sure. Well, first, a little correction. I'm not the CEO of Dash. Dash doesn't have one.
Oh, right.
But I am the CEO of Dash Core Group, which is one of the many teams that supports the Dash network. We're a little bit unusual in that we are indirectly owned by the network. All of our shares are issued to a trust, and the trust beneficiaries are the Dash Masternode owners. And so we've kind of set it up so that we don't really have a profit motive. Our motive is to serve the needs of the Masternodes and serve the needs of the network. And my own background, for anyone that doesn't know, I kind of come from a fairly traditional finance background. I was with McKinsey for a number of years, became an associate partner in their financial services practice, and spent several years at a hedge fund investing in the payment space. And so I kind of bring a pretty broad payments perspective to things, and one of the benefits of having that background is I guess the ability to kind of view cryptocurrency in the context of the broader payments ecosystem and not simply in relation to other cryptocurrencies. And so I really started out with the team in a finance role my first year from 2016 to 2017, and then I assumed the CEO position for the team in April of last year.
And thanks, Ryan. Thanks for the correction there too. That is one of the things that that really attracted me personally to Dash, is that it's like a utility service for money, and its goal is to serve the planet. So, Bob, why don't you give us a little introduction and how you ended up with the Dash team?
Sure, thanks. My name is Bob Carroll. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Dash Core Group, and in that role, I'm responsible for the engineering efforts of the core software that's run on the network. And my background is in computer science and database and mobile application development. So I've been doing that for the last 30 years or so, and used to travel regularly to the Denver Tech Center. So I was working for a database company in the mid-90s, and that was part of the patch that we would get to quite often. So kind of feel like I'm there in spirit with you today. But I've been with the team for about 3 months now, and had spent the majority of my career in kind of larger enterprises, built and delivered the first online learning system for the University of Phoenix. And so kind of spent my career in growing and scaling large-scale business-to-consumer types of technologies. And really excited to be here with you today.
Thanks, Bob. So we've got a few minutes here before we go into the break. Let's just get a quick Dash 101. And I think I don't know how many new people we have here tonight. I think most people are somewhat familiar with cryptocurrency. Some people are familiar with Bitcoin. How about maybe I can get a feel for the crowd. Like, how many people are very familiar with Dash, would consider themselves very familiar with Dash? We've got about 80% of the crowd. So for those 20%, I want to make sure that they're up to speed before we launch too far away from them. So yeah, quick Dash 101. Either one of you guys.
Oh man. Is this the elevator pitch?
Yes.
All right. Well, in short, I would say that Dash is a payments-oriented digital currency. There's a lot of different use cases for digital currency. We're very focused on the payments use case. We have a number of improvements over the Bitcoin code base that we forked from, including enhanced privacy features and faster transactions. We have transaction speeds of about 1.5 seconds, and that's on par with what you would expect from a credit card authorization as an example, and it really makes us viable at the point of sale, which we're seeing in a lot of different markets like Venezuela right now, where we're really the only viable alternative. And the other aspects that make the network unique, very low transaction fees and the ability to scale on-chain. And a lot of that comes from our Masternode network and the capabilities that provides to the network. And the last component is our governance model. Most cryptocurrencies, the governance is dictated by the hash rate of miners, and the version of the software that's supported is determined by that level of support. We have a much more explicit governance model in which we have imbued with self-funding. And the way that governance model works is that our block reward is split between not only miners, but other needs for the network as well. We were really the first network to recognize that there's more than one need to operating a payment network. Mining is important, but it's not the only thing. And so the other components, 45% of our block reward goes to miners, 45% goes towards masternodes, and the last 10% goes towards anything else. Anyone is free to put a proposal up to the Dash network to receive funding and provide some service to the network. The masternodes themselves vote on that, and the highest ranking proposals pay out as part of a monthly budget. And that provides us, that provides us with the ability to kind of be self-determining. The things that are requiring support receive it directly from the network and not from some third party. And it also makes the governance explicit. It really allows the network to vote on a decision, and the decision is final.
Yes, yes. All of that are all the main points that I would share with anybody. We've got, there's the Masternode system that is a very democratic way that people who are invested in the system have a say in how the system will grow. They can vote on proposals, and all that vote does is decide where the money's going to go, including Dash Core Group, including the Crypto Show, including Dash Venezuela, including many, many other projects that have been funded over the past 3 years since its inception in 2015. And Dash Core, the Dash protocol actually was running for a long period of time before the Masternode system was implemented. And in my opinion, 2018 is being filled with this whole idea of governance. Dash, in my opinion, in the cryptocurrency space was responsible for demonstrating the importance, value, and a way to implement a solid functioning governance system. And I'm saying governance, which is decision-making, not government, which is mind control. So no, that's a joke. Anyway, but what we have in the form of Dash is, there's a regulatory structure that actually exists. It's an internationally recognized regulatory structure in the form of Dash Core Group that Ryan mentioned, the trust system that who the beneficiaries are the Masternode owners or the network. It's an association of Masternode owners, right? Legally speaking, is that right? And then it creates an environment where they can act on behalf of, by way of a Swiss administrator, on on behalf of the Masternode network, excuse me, the Masternode owners, right, with regard to the assets. And what are the assets in this case? Dash Core Group Incorporated. And I think there's a new thing about Dash Ventures, and we'll come back and maybe talk about that for a minute right after the break.
Right.
And we were talking before the break about that structure, right? And I think one of the interesting things that Danny was bringing up over the break is that Dash is, if I'm right, if we're all right, if our beliefs and perceptions are correct, the very first corporation to be owned by a decentralized autonomous organization. Is that an accurate statement? Would you guys agree?
It is. I mean, technically, it is owned by a trust, and the trust beneficiaries are the network. I think we certainly tried to get as close to an ownership structure as we could without putting onerous requirements on the Masternode network. It would have been possible for them to technically own Dash Core Group, but would have required them to self-identify. And that is something that I think many Masternode owners would have an issue with. Right now, mining income and Masternode income is self-identified income. And I think that a lot of Masternode owners really value their anonymity or their semi-anonymity. And so having them register in order to own a share of Dash Core Group was not something that we really wanted to do. But this establishes most of the benefits of that ownership, which is we have a real fiduciary duty back to the network. And for those who understand what that legally means, it means I have to act. I have no choice but to act in the best interests of the Masternode network as I see it. And that's the main benefit that we wanted to imbue with this new legal structure, and make sure that accountability was there that would come with ownership. And so technically, it's not a completely accurate statement to say that we're owned by the Masternodes or the Masternode operators, but it's about as close as we could come.
Nice. So there's been a transformation, I think, in the period of time that I discovered Dash, let's say early 2016, to where we are today. And in my personal opinion, that transformation is from, maybe a ragtag group of developers and kind of startup-minded people to a little bit more robust organization that now has, roughly a monthly budget of, what is it, $1 million or so, or 750,000, depending on like what you're looking at and the month and what the expenditures are for the month. But there's a team, full team of 70 people, not all developers, managers, product owners, designers, people in marketing, people in strategy, those sorts of things. And part of that growth is the addition of Bob, who recently came in as CTO and is kind of bringing a new flavor to the technical organization. Bob, do you want to talk about what your plans are and what you think you kind of came into when you entered into this space?
Sure. Yeah, it was. I think like you said, the organization was going through great growth. We had, really emerged from a volunteer-based organization as an open source project of people who were committed to the fundamental ideals of what Dash is and what Dash stands for, as well as cryptocurrency as a whole. And so we had a very motivated group of individuals working on projects, and really transformed from a volunteer type organization to more of contracted employment, where individuals were now compensated for the things that they were doing out of passion prior to that. And with that, comes some nuances, right? Whenever you start getting paid for something, it changes your motivations and your incentive structure. What we find is, that we've got a fairly large development organization now that has come from various backgrounds, some from large corporations, but a lot just from small sort organizations, or even new to a development world. There's a lot of people that are jumping on the bandwagon of software development these days because they've been introduced from one angle or another, and blockchain and crypto actually introduced a lot of people who have then become developers from that. So with that, I think there's some process that is that is best practice in software development organizations that needs to be implemented and adopted if you want to get predictable results. And the greater value that the Dash network has, the higher the expectations are as far as how the network operates, the exactness of functionality of the protocol itself. And that really raises the standards as far as the output that needs to be developed as far as the product. So really focused on product quality, making sure that the team is meshing and following good practices. Now that's all on top of enhancing the software. And we've had a great vision that we're also trying to implement there. We might get into that a little bit later.
So you touched on a couple subjects there, and one of the questions that's related questions from our community, our Colorado blockchain community, was just kind of a very basic, like, how do the devs actually get paid? And kind of a follow-on question to that is, how are the devs, incentivized to be acting in the best interests of the code base and the users? Either one of you.
Yeah, Ryan, why don't you take that?
Yeah, so I think that we've gone through several iterations on the pay scale, kind of as the network grew. And early on, when Evan first put a core team compensation proposal to the network, it was a fixed amount of Dash, and it was simply split evenly between developers and other contributors to the team. It wasn't a lot of money. I mean, it was a couple $100 or something like that. It was more of a thank you for people that were putting in long hours. And as that grew, and when I first got involved in the organization more formally, we started to increase and bifurcate that between people that were contributing the most and those that were, contributing a few hours a month. And that's when we first started to be able to pay people not quite a livable wage, but something that wasn't at least crazy. And it really attracted a number of people who were sitting on the sidelines and saying, well, I would like to spend more time on this project, but I can't. Like, I can't do away with my other income sources and come work on this project. And so it really allowed some people to step off the sidelines when we started to do that. And then as the project continued to grow, we actually transitioned to, doing an HR assessment based on people's locations, roles, et cetera, and start paying the median rate for a lot of those roles. And that changed it. That changed the project in a lot of ways for a lot of people, because when you're a volunteer, you kind of have the freedom to say, hey, I feel like working 6 hours today, and then going to an event with my kids or something like that, into a real job where it's like you're being paid, and not everybody made that transition back in 2017. Some people kind of raised their hands and said, you know what, I actually don't want to be on this project full time. And we accommodated people with, part-time, hourly, a lot of different things in order to keep them involved, and maintain that kind of historical knowledge that people carried forward with them, as particularly in the development area. And I'd say where we're at now is, a lot of people have joined for different reasons. I think, the level of passion that it takes to quit your job and make almost nothing is a little bit different than the type that we're able to attract now, which are kind of people that are top talent. They have the ability to work anywhere they choose, and the sales pitch to them is oftentimes, hey, not only can you get a fair rate here, but this is an area where you can come and change the world. And that's been an attractive proposition to a lot of people. And so certainly the pay at Dash is not lavish. There isn't anybody that I think is making significantly more than they have at other jobs. And in fact, a lot of people are making significantly less. It is a job of passion and of service. And that mentality still kind of carries forward, I think, right now.
We're coming to break, but I want to go ahead and ask one other question real quick.
Sure.
How do you guys gauge kind of when you're deciding what to do as the core group? How do you gauge kind of what the Masternodes actually want? I mean, do you take that into consideration, or how does that work?
Well, the communication from the network is pretty indirect. It's a yes or a no, right? There are other channels through which we can gather input on what they value, but it isn't a direct, voting mechanism in that sense. I think that what we do is we put forward our vision and say, here's what we think needs to happen. As experts in our field, whether that's from the CTO or our chief marketing officer or my perspective or our head of strategy, everyone kind of brings forward their points of view as to what needs to happen. We coalesce around an overall strategy where those pieces come together, and we put forward that to the community. And ultimately, we're trying to put forward our best vision. And I think it's really important to put together a cohesive vision, and that everyone is rowing in that same direction if you're going to achieve it. And so I don't think there is a mechanism in place to directly find out exactly how the Masternodes would want us to behave on every issue, but there is a vision that's being put forward and is very well supported. And I think that that's what we aim to do.
So Ryan, Bob.
Yes, we can hear you. Are we going to run out of the?
Yeah, we're running out of that. I wasn't able. Their payment method was down. I was trying to get the Pro earlier today, and
dang it, they should be Dash integrated.
Exactly.
So what we're going to do, Ryan and Bob, we're going to send you another link, and if you could maybe just join us for a little bit on this next link, and we'll get some questions from the audience, and maybe just carry this conversation a little bit. Okay, cool. Well, welcome back, guys. There was one question that came in from the Colorado Blockchain Group also, which was, and if you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of give a little precursor before you guys give an answer. But how do you guard against vote delegation being bad and encourage voting in general? And from my perspective, it doesn't really look like Dash Core Group is engaged in influencing voting, nor guarding against quote unquote bad votes. But if I'm understanding Ryan's stance correctly, and I want to confirm that my understanding is still correct, that they will voice an opinion when it's egregiously good or bad for the network. Is that right? Maybe you guys want to take it from there.
Well, this is something that I've spoken about before. I've been very restrained in terms of my own opinions and the opinions of the organization as a whole on voting and, in particular weighing in on whether a particular proposal is good or bad. I think that in cases where I have information that the network doesn't, such as dependencies of one proposal on our ability to land important deals or integrations, that's something that the network deserves to know. And in that case, I would put forward and have put forward my own opinion or the opinion of our organization to say, hey, this one's important.
And to be clear, I want to make sure that, again, the newbies understand, dashcentral.com .org or .com. I can't.
.org.
.org is the place where a lot of conversations happen on these proposals, and you can look at any proposal that's currently up and historical proposals on -votetracker.com. Just want to get that out there. That's where that conversation generally happens.
Yeah, and so I think that we have a responsibility to wield our influence carefully, and we don't want to be telling the network what it should or shouldn't be doing. We want to put forward our own vision for the network, and we want to put forward what we believe is important for us to work on. And we certainly hope that the Masternodes support that. But I think that it wouldn't serve the network if all the decisions were being directed mainly by a small group of people within DashCore, and a bunch of people were voting for or against those based on that.
Right. Did you have anything to add on that, Bob?
No, the whole governance structure is just amazing to me, coming from outside of the industry and watching it happen. And when you think about, I've run $100 million IT budgets in the past, and just looking at, how a typical organization would go forward for funding, it has a lot of issues with it, right? I mean, you've got, that was my run rate. That's what I used to have. And in this, we are reviewing a budget on a monthly basis. And you think about how prudent that is and how fiscally conservative it is. It's a huge change for me personally, but it just speaks to the integrity of the governance structure itself when you have to actually go through some of that on a basis, that no other organization would really go through by going for that funding every month.
Nice. So, personal anecdote. When I started working at Dash back in 2017, I tried to get, or I was working to try to understand a way that we could basically sell Dash on the website. And it became more and more daunting challenge as I realized that there were some significant, perhaps regulatory and ambiguous hurdles around that particular thing. And if we wanted to be above board and in compliance with law and all these kinds of things, there was going to be some massive hurdles just to be able to allow you to buy Dash on the website. And as we looked more and more, as I understood, the legal team looked more and more into that, and the executive team looked into that. We started to get longer and longer polls pushing that idea away because it would introduce a risk, as I understand it, to the Dash core team. But it sounds like since then, with this legal structure and being able to represent certain kind of business deals and sign deals, and in addition, this other new thing called Dash Ventures, there may be an opportunity to pursue some things like that. Do you guys want to talk about that a little bit, Dash Ventures, and how the new structure allows you to operate in regulated business environments?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. So when it comes to the proposal system, it is a grant system today. And when you're providing a grant, it does really well when you're trying to, say, offset some costs for an integration, or you're trying to pay someone directly for their labors or their efforts. What it doesn't do so well at is with really high risk ventures to say, hey, we want to fund your startup. Well, most startups have something like a 90% failure rate. And so if you're providing that as a grant, it doesn't make as much sense as, approaching an existing business and providing a grant to them to integrate. And so in order to open up more of this space or more of this potential investments to the network, it only makes sense for us to do that if we get something in return, if we take some equity or have some skin in the outcome of that venture, so that if it is successful, we at least get a chunk back that the network can redeploy and reinvest into its network. And so that was the idea behind Dash Ventures. It requires a very different legal structure than the one that houses Dash Core Group, but we think it's important in order to allow the network to make more of these types of investments. And we see this in the votes and the discussions that take place where people are saying, hey, why should we fund your entire startup? I'm voting no on this one. Great idea, but get it up and running first, and then we'll talk. And so I think that this will open up new possibilities. I do think the network probably needs to be a little conservative when it comes to competing with its own ecosystem of partners. If we start spinning up our own exchange that's subsidized by the network or something like that, that may not serve the network the best. I'm not saying one way or the other, but there are potential conflicts here as well that the network will need to navigate. I think in the fullness of time, they'll realize, the pros and cons of various approaches, and we'll hone in on a optimal way of kind of divvying out these assets, these resources that the network has. But Dash Ventures really just opens the door to a new set of those.
Okay.
We're doing some things right now, very interesting, like integrating one of our partners directly into the Dash wallet. And it still is just a link. It, takes you to their services, but it allows, your average newcomer to download the wallet and immediately identify a way that they can go acquire Dash in a user-friendly way and start to use it. And so you'll see that in a future release. So we are finding ways to work with businesses that are licensed in this way, and do mitigate that risk for us, that can nonetheless provide a very similar user experience to the one that you described.
Any burning questions from the audience yet?
I have one.
Oh, okay.
So
Right here.
A lot of people assume that Core owns tons of Masternodes. I mean, how are those? Are they just owned individually by members of Core? And do you guys kind of coordinate in any way on how you're going to vote for things?
Dash Core Group does not operate any Masternodes with any of the funding that is provided to it by the network. Those funds sit in wallets or sit in addresses that are controlled by Core Group, but they are not used to generate Masternode income or vote on the network or anything like that. Individuals within the team do own Masternodes. I don't believe that. I mean, there's obviously no way for me to verify this.
You guys don't have a board meeting and say, we're going to vote for this and vote for that, right?
That never happens. And in fact, oftentimes Core Group members will vote opposite of each other on various issues. We don't talk about everything other than in our context as Masternode owners and friends to say, hey, what do you think of this one? Well, I'm going to vote for it. Oh, I'm going to vote against it, But there's no coordinated board meeting that takes place where we're all saying, okay, what are we going to vote for this month? That never has taken place ever. But I don't think that there's any core team members that control a large enough number of Masternodes to make a huge influence on the outcome regardless. If all the members of Dash Core Group wanted a particular proposal to pass, we would not be able to force anything through. There's been accusations that there's enough Masternodes in Core Group. I haven't seen evidence of that. I said,
I've heard all of those as well,
and
that's why I'm asking these questions.
I wanted to jump in for the audience too, in case you don't know. There's a minimum 10% bar. You have to have a minimum 10% quorum of the votes in order for any proposal to pass. And I think at the current count of roughly 4,700 to 4,800 nodes. Oh, there was a recent drop because of the upgrade, right? We lost a few hundred from the upgrade. So we're in
They'll come back. They'll come back. They'll upgrade.
They'll come back. Yeah, they'll upgrade and come back. But anyway, so that would mean you need a minimum 460 votes just to maybe pass. And then you'll end up at the bottom of the pile. So, but we had a next question from our audience and co-organizer, Tom.
Ryan, Bob, it's great to have you at our meetup today. This is our first Dash Colorado meetup, and I would like to thank everyone who's been involved to be here and to make this happen. I thank everyone here tonight. My question actually goes to Bob. There's been talks about release early and release often. Is this going to mean we're going to see more core updates to the software than we have in the last, say, 6 months?
Yeah, that's a great question. Appreciate that. So we had our last release right around the 1st of July. That was our 12.3 release. And, it's an interesting concept because I've done things in the past where you could set a roadmap and a release schedule and say, we want to make sure that we're releasing on a quarterly basis or, bi-monthly basis or annual basis. And, really drive that and then let the features that are highest priority define the release itself. I'll say that we're not doing that. That's not going to be the key focus at Dash. And right now we're really in the middle of two initiatives. The one being to prepare for some significant functionality changes in our environment. And then the second one is to actually deliver on those. And so in the 12.x releases, we have had to prepare for what we're referring to as a layer 2 of the network to be able to build distributed applications on top of Dash. And so I guess in short, I'm going to say that it will be to release often, yes, but not to tie our hands to a time schedule that says we are going to release on this type of frequency, because the complexity of the work that takes place is going to vary in size, and the quality of the deliverable cannot be compromised. And so those are going to be the fundamental values that we work within. But I will give you one example of the release early, and that is we have the opportunity, unlike many consumer-oriented products, that you release it to the public and it's there, and there it is, warts and all, and or greatness and all. And with the importance of cryptocurrency and the transactional integrity, we need to make sure that what we release is of the highest quality. And so our release early will be centered around our testnet releases. And we will be releasing more often on testnet, I would say, than we have in the past, which is kind of a release early strategy as well, although your words were not words that we've been using, but they do fit. So I appreciate you sharing those with us. The benefit of releasing to a testnet is to open that up to the community, to get feedback, not only to bang on the product, but also to be able to look into the code and make sure that the community itself has visibility into that for transparency, as well as to help contribute to make the code even better. So I do have a bent or an orientation to deliver often, and that will continue to be a focus at Dash. I love getting new product out. There's nothing more exciting than new releases, but we do have to recognize the complexity of what we're doing.
Well, I want to respect your time again. Does anybody have any last-minute burning questions for this team? One here? All right. We're going to one more question from the audience, and then we'll let you go, Ryan and Bob, all right?
Great.
So how do you guys feel about the Swarm Fund fractionally tokenizing a Dash Masternode?
Yeah, I've spoken with that team. I think that this type of solution is inevitable, right? There's a lot of people who want to own a share of a masternode. And I think Swarm is only one example of what you're going to see on that front that will give people that access. There's another, I think Neptune Dash is also beginning to form masternode shares as part of a service that they're providing. So I don't know the details of, whether or not they're fully compliant from having the right licensing, or whether or not the technical solution keeps user funds secure. And so I can't speak to them from that standpoint. But from the standpoint of whether or not they do good or harm to the ecosystem, I think they're probably net a good thing to have developed. In the end, there is demand for this, and I know that we're not going to be able to get to it for quite some time to be able to build it in at the protocol layer, simply because we have a lot of opportunities that are a lot more valuable than that, that we have to deliver on in the meantime. Evolution obviously being the main example of that. And so I think we're going to stay focused there. And if these types of services can, in a safe manner, provide people with the ability to, participate in the Masternode network, I think that's probably net a healthy thing. I don't know enough about how votes and things like that will be aggregated from the individual user shares, or how much integrity there is there, but I think it'll give a lot of people access that probably have felt a little shut out up till this point. And we don't have the desire to change the collateral requirement either. That question comes up in parallel a lot. And the reason is because if we were to decrease it to, say, 100 dash, we would
Sorry,
end up
Ryan,
with,
which is 1,000 dash for those who don't know. Sorry,
yeah,
go on.
The collateral today is 1,000 dash, and that yields a network of a little less than 5,000 masternodes. If we were to decrease that to 100, the economics would tell you that we'd end up with roughly 50,000 masternodes. And that would actually slow down the propagation of blocks. It would create lower transaction throughput and a lot of complicated things that we don't want to see happen. And so, we don't have the intention of changing that threshold. So these types of services can enable people to participate at that level with much less collateral available.
Thanks for the question, Bob.
Right on. Thank you.
Well, thanks again, Ryan, Bob, for coming out. I'm sure that the crowd here thanks you. Want to give everybody a round, give them a round for showing up. If we do this again, maybe we can get you again. Otherwise, thanks, Ryan, Bob. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. We
Good to see
appreciate
you
it.
too. Take care, everybody.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.